There's been a lot of focus in recent years on the growth of the mobile internet, social media, e-commerce, and other important technology trends. We remain excited by these trends and believe they've got much further to run. But there's also a sense in which technology has perhaps been sometimes too focused on these areas. As an early Facebook employee and the co-founder of Cloudera, Jeff Hammerbacher, put it way back in 2011, the best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads. We did see this change a little bit during the COVID period, as the cloud in particular was very, very important when it came to keeping the world spinning, the economy moving, and life continuing during the crisis. The technology sector proved its criticality then, and it's our belief and hope that this is just one of many big challenges tech will be able to help address over the coming years and decades. In fact, we'd argue that technology is one of the most powerful levers that humanity has to tackle really big challenges, and challenges certainly do not come any bigger than the climate challenge at the moment. Global temperatures are 1.2 degrees higher than pre-industrial levels, which has resulted in an increase in the frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Climate science tells us that it's likely to be necessary to reach net zero by 2050 to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees versus pre-industrial levels and mitigate the threat from these physical risks. Net zero is the point at which the amount of greenhouse gases produced and removed from the atmosphere are in balance. To do this, and to put the world on the least cost pathway to limit global warming, human-caused emissions of CO2 need to fall by 55% in 2030 versus 2018. The Inflation Reduction Act signed recently by President Biden is just one of many necessary steps to achieve this goal. But how can we possibly do this? Lots and lots of things are required, but they fall into three main categories: policy, capital, and technology. Policy covers things like government net zero commitments, energy transition pathways, emissions legislation, carbon pricing potentially, subsidies for electrification and for EVs, building regulations and all those things. These are very important, but they're only part of the story. The second leg to the stool is capital. A vast amount of capital will be needed to support the transition. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, assumes $100 to $150 trillion. McKinsey says $275 trillion. Either way, the quantity of capital required is enormous to fund this kind of seismic change. The third leg of the stool and the focus of our report is technology and the impact that the technology will play in tackling climate change. Technology is crucial to the decarbonisation of the energy sector, which is responsible for around 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions today. This will be its first major role in tackling climate change. Second, technology helps facilitate a step change in the annual rate of energy intensity improvements, getting greater efficiency from the energy that we do produce. These improvements need to be about 4% a year through 2030, or roughly 3 times the rate that we've seen over the past 20 years, and really amount to nothing short of the complete transformation of how we produce, how we transport, and how we consume energy. And technology is so important because behavioural changes to avoid demand only account for about 4% of reduced emissions under the IEA's net zero scenario. Unfortunate recent experience suggests that even quite extreme changes in behaviour will not be anything like enough on their own. If we think back to the COVID crisis, despite widespread lockdowns, massive travel and activity restrictions during 2020, global energy consumption only fell by 4.5% and carbon emissions by just 6.3% over the year. Behavioural change is simply not enough on its own. So what are some of the routes by which this can happen and the energy sector can decarbonise? One of the most interesting areas is solar power. Solar has already seen a phenomenal collapse in unit costs, reflecting its position as a technology with a technology-like cost curve rather than an extractive process like the oil and gas extraction that it's replacing. This change has happened much more quickly than expected. For example, there was a study of nearly 3,000 projections of the annual rate at which solar costs would fall between 2010 and 2020, and this study found that the average projection was minus 2.6% annually. All studies projected cost declines of less than 6% per annum. In actuality, solar costs actually fell 15% per annum during the period. To understand the implications of this change, it's worth considering that Germany used to pay German farmers 40 cents per kilowatt hour to run solar panels, whereas a recent solar power auction in Portugal saw a price of just 1 cent per kilowatt hour, a 97% decline. But solar, and wind like it, are intermittent power sources, which means that energy storage solutions must keep pace with their development and deployment to fully decarbonise the energy sector. The two most significant areas of technology development in energy storage are batteries and hydrogen. Battery costs have fallen by more than 50% in the last 5 years as investments to meet electric vehicle demand have increased global capacity. Most of this change has come from improvements in the battery pack, including the battery management systems, but 80% of the cost of this sits in the battery cell, which is a big opportunity for further innovation and R&D, especially in materials science, given 80% of cell costs are materials at the moment. As with historical solar cost and performance improvements, batteries also enjoy a declining cost curve, albeit at a slightly slower rate than solar have managed, perhaps halving by 2030. Batteries are also likely to represent a $200 billion opportunity over the next decade, and battery storage installations could grow at a 30% CAGR through that period. Hydrogen will also play a meaningful role in decarbonising the energy sector, as direct electrification is not possible or economic in many critical industries. Hydrogen's high energy density per mass means it will likely play a leading role in steel, long-distance shipping and other heavy industries, and make up maybe 15 to 20% of final energy demand, on top of the 70% provided by direct electricity. Hydrogen could also augment batteries in grid balancing in renewables-led energy systems. The way this would work is that hydrogen would be produced via electrolysis when power supply outstrips demand, and then reconverted to electricity when demand exceeds supply, or when supply is constrained, for example at night for solar power. Again, with hydrogen, the technological impetus is positive here. Total installed capacity for green hydrogen production was 0.3 gigawatts in 2020, but current project pipelines indicates capacity of up to 80 to 120 gigawatts maybe could be available by 2030. There are more than 30 national hydrogen strategies which pledge a 400-fold increase in clean hydrogen capacity by 2030 versus 2020. While solar, wind, hydrogen and batteries will help decarbonise the energy sector, we also see a major role for digital technology, for software, for data and innovation in helping to facilitate a step change in the annual rate of energy intensity improvements in the economy. Studies have in fact indicated that the ambitious application of digital technology could help deliver 1/3 of the emissions reductions required by 2030 for a pathway to an outcome well below 2 degrees. In our report, we consider 3 structural trends which reflect the technology sector's contribution to addressing the climate challenge: the ongoing move to the cloud, the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the increased importance of semiconductors in the world. First, the move to the cloud helps reduce carbon emissions. Despite many concerns about the growing energy draw from data centres, recent IEA research suggests that overall energy demand has barely increased during the past decade from about 200 to 250 terawatt hours, or about 1% of global energy draw, even as traffic has increased 15-fold. The main reason for this is because compute has shifted from less efficient on-premise corporate data centres to much more efficient hyperscale cloud locations, which are much more efficient and environmentally friendly, mainly due to more efficient servers, higher utilisation rates, and increasing use of renewable power to power them. A recent Accenture study found cloud migrations can reduce carbon emissions by more than 84% and energy usage by 65% compared with conventional infrastructure. Amazon Web Services infrastructure is 3.6 times more energy efficient than the median US enterprise data center. Microsoft found a 93% carbon emission reduction from energy efficiency savings and the impact of their renewable electricity purchases. Second, the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning technology is critical to enabling successful adaptation, particularly over a compressed timeframe. Artificial intelligence and machine learning can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help society adapt to a changing climate, just as mRNA-based vaccines proved pivotal in tackling the threat from COVID. The landscape of issues to which ML and AI technologies can be applied is vast and includes the dynamic forecasting and solving of supply, demand and capacity optimization problems in the energy network, accelerating materials science discovery, fusion science, reducing the impact of current systems, driving efficiencies in transport networks, optimizing buildings, and countless other applications. In fact, a study found that AI alone could save up to 4% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and create between 18 million and 38 million net new jobs globally. AI is also better at predicting and analysing which near-term energy efficiency measures actually work. For example, building emissions are 2 to 3 times predicted levels typically. Finally, we expect to see a large impact from semiconductors increasing prevalence and efficiency. Semiconductors are very well positioned as the underlying technology which underpins increasing energy efficiency, automation, EV adoption, and overall expansion of renewable energy sources. A recent Goldman Sachs study indicated semiconductors can enable avoidance of 5 times more emissions than they emit. Lighting is a basic but a significant example, as LEDs, light bulbs, use 75% less energy and can last up to 25 times longer than incandescent lighting. In 2015, the US Department of Energy found the lighting industry consumed up to 15% of global power, which has already declined to 12% since then, mainly via LED adoption. In the PC market, AMD achieved a 32-fold energy efficiency improvement between 2014 and 2020, and combined with improvements in the power efficiency of memory chips, has meant that the power consumption of PCs is between 4 and 22% lower than it otherwise would have been. In the auto sector, silicon carbide-based power semiconductors can run with between 70 and 90% less energy loss compared to silicon-based chips, which means 20% longer ranges and up to 50% faster time for charging for EVs. The silicon carbide market is expected to grow at a 54% CAGR through 2024 to reach more than $5 billion as these applications ramp up. To conclude, the International Energy Agency makes it very, very clear. All of the technologies needed to achieve the necessary deep cuts in global emissions by 2030 already exist, and the policies that can drive their deployment are already proven. We look forward to the increasing role technology will play and the investment opportunities this could offer as the fight against climate change intensifies over the coming years and decades.